Peace, peace, peace. What's going on? Let me just check everything. Yeah, Mike, who may have joined the live now. Okay, so peace and blessings to anybody who might join the chat while we're live, and also peace and blessings to everybody who might watch it in the future. First of all, let me just say, forgive me for looking like Morpheus from the Matrix. I'm in the house right now, and it's summertime. It's real hot outside, but it's freezing cold in the house. We got air conditioning on, and air conditioning is just making me real cold. I've been chilly for weeks now. I don't know what's going on with my blood, but I've been cold. And also let me just say, please forgive me for hopping on real quick. I'm not going to be that long, but hopefully I will be strong and give y'all some much needed information. So what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about mental health and some research that I've been doing on antidepressants. Now, I've been doing research and discovered that the use of antidepressants in the U.S. is rapidly rising. And it's been rapidly rising for the last few decades. And not only that, but one more thing that's very strange to me is, well, I won't say the use of and the rise of antidepressants is strange in and of itself, but I saw something that a detail that was very strange to me. A lot of these psychopharmaceutical companies that make antidepressants, these companies are making projections in the future for how much they'll make in the future. Of course, every company, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, you're going to make projections. You can't run a company without making projections about what's going to happen in the future, how much money you're going to make in the future, how much money the shareholders and investors are going to get. Because you have to make sure that you feed everybody and make sure that you're able to keep these companies open and you're able to basically sustain these companies, and you sustain companies through profit. I get it. I understand that. I'm not being unrealistic. But I was very curious about how you would predict how many people in the future, or even approximate how many people in the future are going to be using a product like antidepressants. Because in order for you to be able to guess how many people are going to be using antidepressants, you have to be able to guess how many people are going to be depressed and how much mental illness there's going to be. And I'm trying to figure out, as I'm studying and doing the research, what kind of predictors could a company use, an accountant, somebody who designs mathematical models, a statistician. How could you predict something like that? How could you predict how many mentally ill people are going to be in the future? That's a very strange thing. Because how do you know? What if something happens and there's a grand awakening and the number of mentally ill people decreases? What if this year your company is selling antidepressants to, let's say, just off the top of my head, making a number up, 75 million people in the US, right? 75 million people in the US. And out of that 75 million people in the US, next year, everybody decides to get off, or half those people decide to get off. So instead of 75 million, it's 35 million. How would you be able to predict something like that? If you're having somebody on antidepressants, isn't the goal to wean them off and not have them dependent on any? I mean, I would totally baffled. I have no idea how somebody could predict something like that. And according to their estimates, and this is an estimate, a projection from the year of 2022 to 2026, the global market for antidepressant use will increase by $5.22 billion. So let's backtrack for a quick second. What is an antidepressant? An antidepressant is a prescription medication. They call it a psychopharmaceutical that affects the brain. And what it does is that it excites certain transmitters in the brain so that you'll feel stimulated and you won't feel depressed. They're supposed to lift the and elevate the mood, right? And they're used to treat certain mental illnesses, depression, of course, being one, but also major compulsive disorder. That's one. Obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety disorder, and PTSD. And I was curious, how would you be able to predict how many people would have major compulsive disorder? Usually, major compulsive disorder, at least from what I research, happens when individuals are traumatized, and it's a way they have of trying to gain control over certain situations when they're traumatized. How would you be able to predict how many people are going to be traumatized to that extent? Because some people go through very traumatic circumstances, and that never happens to them. I've been through traumatic circumstances, and I was never obsessive compulsive. How could they predict that? How could you predict how many people are going to develop anxiety disorder? I mean, you can look at the past, but just by looking at the past, you wouldn't be able to predict an increase, right, in the amount of people with anxiety disorder, or an increase. You wouldn't be able to predict that. If I'm looking at last year's numbers, I won't necessarily be able to accurately predict next year's numbers, or especially not numbers for the next 4 years, right? Unless I'm missing something. Maybe I'm missing something. But anyway, antidepressants are or going to depression. So I was thinking about how you will be able to predict mental illness in an individual, and there are certain things that you can look at as indicators of the possibility of mental illness. Few things. One of them, I have a list of five. I did find a list of I think it was more than five, but I just wrote down these five. And I apologize if I seem like I'm all over the place because my mind is racing. I'm trying to keep everything organized and together. So some factors where you might be able to predict mental illness: obesity. So if you're looking at obesity in the US, obesity, if it's going to increase next year, if you can tell by looking at last year's numbers, that next year's numbers and next few years' numbers, there's going to be increases in obesity, then that may be an indicator that there may be an increase in depression and mental illness. Another one, lack of close relationships. Now we know that we are living in a post-pandemic or post-pandemic America. So a lot of people were really affected by the inability to be around loved ones, to communicate with loved ones, to even go out and be out and about amongst crowds of strangers. Even that to some people is enough social stimulation to keep them balanced. But after during the pandemic, a lot of people weren't able to be with loved ones. That definitely had an effect on mental health. But now the pandemic is over with, or the pandemic is over with, a lot of people are reconnecting with loved ones and spending time with loved ones. But I could understand this as a predictor of mental illness, because you have more and more people on social media, more and more people staring at their phones all day and kind of socializing on social media with friends and family. So they might not necessarily have close relationships. They might just have individuals who they socialize with on social media, and because they lack the intimate social relationships, that could be an indicator of the potential for increased mental health issues in the future. I get it. The next one, non-working status. From what I understand, um, the economy is really tough. We're going through major inflation right now, but the unemployment rate, from what I understand, is low. However, that doesn't mean that people aren't stressed out because they're working at jobs where they're not making enough money. Trust me, I understand. A lot of people are really grinding real hard and can't make ends meet. So I get that part. So a lot of individuals might be stressed out over their job, or they might be stressed out because of not being able to work. And if there's a lot of individuals who are unable to work, then that will definitely be an indicator that mental health issues are going to rise in the future. But that doesn't seem to be the issue now because the unemployment rate is low right now, from what I understand. Another indicator might be proximity to a mentally ill person. So there's a mentally ill person who you're living with, a mentally ill person in your vicinity who you work with on a consistent basis, that could negatively affect your mental health, right? And then last but not least, this one, I don't even want to say this one for the plain and simple fact that it seems kind of sexist, but it says here that if you're female, that is a predictor of, because I guess because they're saying that women are more susceptible to mental health issues and mental illness. They didn't quite explain why in the articles that I was reading, but I'm not sure why either. So I don't even necessarily want to say it because I don't have all the data and I don't want to sound sexist. But it was one of the things that I saw and I just wrote it on a list because I found it so odd. That's something I'm definitely going to have to look a little bit deeper into. But if you look at that list, right? Let's have a look at that list. If you have a look at that list, there are certain things on this list that can be dealt with without medication. Of course, obesity can be dealt with exercise, and they say exercise is good for your mental health. They say that non-working status, but getting a job or starting your own business, that might be able to help with that. Lack of close relationships, building your relationships can help with that. You don't necessarily need medication for some of these things. There's no medication for being female, right? So that's looking at these, and even this one, proximity to mentally ill people. Even looking at proximity to mentally ill people is still very difficult for a corporation who has to be very mathematically precise. It's very difficult for them to be able to predict how many people will be using their product in the future. How is it they're able to make these projections? and not only make these projections, but all these projections are positive. They're saying that they're going to be making money through the roof over the next few years. How can they guess that? How can their math be so precise that they can estimate and say we'll be making an extra $5.22 billion over the next four actually this so the next 3 years? How can you make a projection like that on a global market with so many moving parts and so many moving pieces? And I was thinking about it, and it occurred to me they can make this projection because they can advertise their products. At one point in time, people were not able to advertise prescription products on television, and they were not able to advertise psychopharmaceuticals on TV either. But in 1997, that was lifted, and people were able to advertise for mental health drugs and psychopharmaceuticals on television to consumers, direct to consumers. DTC, direct to consumers. ADTC, advertising directly to consumers. In 1997, that's when they were able to do that. And in 1997, we saw that there was a huge boom in the use of Prozac. Prozac became I think it was the second most prescribed drug that year, 1997. So they know there's going to be an increase in how many people are using their product, because they know that they can increase how much money they use on advertising. But just because you're spending money on advertising, how does that assure you that you're going to have an increase in people who use a product, especially a product like this? Now, a person can decide for themselves and say, hey, I'm going to go to the store and buy sneakers. You see an advertisement for sneakers, you can go and buy those sneakers. You see an advertisement for cake and ice cream, you can go get that cake and ice cream. You see an advertisement for a steakhouse, you can go to that steakhouse and get that steak. Those are things that you can really control. But psychopharmaceutical drugs are drugs that you can only really use if you're sick. You can only get those if you're sick, if you really need it. It's not like if I see an advertisement for a t-shirt and I'm like, yo, that t-shirt look fly, I'm about to get that. It ain't that kind of thing where I, as the consumer, would have that much control where I can go and get it, right? Well, let's think about it like this. When you see those commercials for psychopharmaceutical drugs, what do they always start with? They always start with a problem, and then they make it seem as if their product is the solution. So what happens is they're not promoting the product, they're promoting the sickness. They're not at all promoting the product. They are promoting the sickness. They have to convince you that you are sick and that the cure for your sickness is their product. They have to convince you that you are depressed. They have to convince you that how you feel is in need of medication. They have to convince you that how you feel is so wretched and so low that you can't possibly control it unless you take their drugs. How do they do that? Well, because all of us, no matter what, as human beings, we all have negative feelings. All of us. All of us have experiences that are not pleasant. All of us go through pain. All of us go through suffering. All of us suffer the loss of loved ones. I just lost my Aunt Queen. My cousin Kai, shout out to my cousin Kai. He hit me up a couple days ago and was like, yeah, Auntie Queen just passed away. So we all lose loved ones. We all lose individuals who we really truly care about. We all have breakups. A couple years ago, I went through a divorce. It was brutal. It was brutal. It was tough. It was real hard changing the thing that I cared about and loved and felt was the most important thing in the world to me, my family. Regardless of whatever problems and issues I had, I felt like keeping that black family together was super important. And I wasn't able to do it. And I beat myself up about it a lot. And I was really angry and really hurt by a lot of things. Right? But I realized that what they're doing is that they are making the human condition an abnormality. In other words, things that all of us experience and all of us go through, they have to make it seem as if it's something wrong with it. So you'll reach for that medication. So if you're going through a period of time in your life where you suffered a normal human trauma, lost a loved one, had a breakup, you're feeling depressed, then you see that commercial. Feeling down, try Prozac. Feeling down, try, Lamictal or whatever. Because all of us feel sadness. So if they can make sadness seem like it's something that should not be, if they can make sadness seem like something that you have to eradicate, as opposed to just a part of the human experience that you have to process and make it through, if they can make it seem like something you can stop right here, right now, and it's responsible to take this pill so you won't feel this way, then they'll give you that pill. They'll sell you that pill. They just got to convince you that you need it. And then once they convince you that you need it, next thing you know, you're at your doctor's office and saying, "Hey, doc, I'm kind of depressed." I've heard stories about people I know who went through breakups. I knew a guy who went through a breakup. His girlfriend broke up with him. They were together for a very long time. He was very invested in the relationship, and she broke up with him. She was from a different culture, and her family didn't want her to be with this gentleman because he was, he wasn't from the same culture as their family. So she broke up with him, and not too long after she broke up with him, she ended up marrying somebody from her own culture, and he was devastated. He was heartbroken. He went to speak to a psychologist about it or a psychiatrist about it, and the psychiatrist says, "Wow, you feel sad about this breakup. Here's a prescription for some pills." I've heard stories about individuals who went through divorces. A young lady who I used to know went through a divorce, and someone prescribed her medication for depression. Now, I'm not knocking anybody. I'm not a psychiatrist by any stretch of the imagination, but it seems strange to me that you would prescribe somebody something for a breakup. I've heard of people being prescribed medications for high blood pressure, which even that's strange to me because I realized recently by changing my diet, this high blood pressure that I supposedly had that runs in the family, it went away. I didn't need medication. I just changed my diet and lost some weight. People say diabetes runs in the family. Diabetes don't run in the family. What you eat and what you consume. So you don't always necessarily need medications for these things, but very normal things that everybody goes through: breakups, loss of a loved one, a job transition, or maybe even losing your job. These are things that human beings can process and overcome. But the goal of these corporations is to make a profit. They want to make some money. So they don't care about you processing and overcoming anything. They want to figure out how they can supply you with their product and get paid, which is unfortunate because that's de-evolving the human species. We are made stronger when we learn coping skills and coping techniques and develop ourselves and make ourselves stronger to overcome the pain and obstacles that we experience in life. But when it gets to the point where you feel a little bit of pain or a lot of pain and you take a pill for it immediately without learning how to train yourself to overcome that pain and deal with that emotional pain, you become stronger by overcoming the pain on your own. Now, I'm not knocking anybody who really genuinely needs medication. Some people out there might have a mental imbalance or a chemical imbalance where you need the medication to manage your mental illness. I'm not knocking you if that's the case. However, the idea of somebody getting a pill because they're having a hard time dealing with a breakup seems bizarre to me. The idea of somebody losing an aunt or an uncle or losing a father or a mother, and then somebody gives you some pills in order to deal with it seems bizarre to me because we all experience those things. Everybody experiences those things. So, can these companies predict that there's going to be increase in the use of psychopharmaceutical drugs because everybody has these experiences, and all they have to do is just convince as many people as possible that these experiences can be stopped, or we can assuage the pain of these experiences by giving you some drugs? And is that going to improve humanity or make humanity more dependent and weaker? Once again, I'm going to keep repeating this because I don't want nobody seeing this video and getting the wrong idea. Not knocking anybody who has a serious mental health issue. Not knocking anybody who might need their medication. Not knocking anybody who has a great relationship with a psychiatrist and they feel they can trust this individual. Not knocking anybody who has really devastating mental health problems and they really need the medication to stabilize and manage themselves. No problem. Not knocking that. God bless you. But what I'm saying is pain is a part of life. And growth is learning how to deal with that pain. Maturity is learning how to deal with that pain. When you're young, you get your heart broken. It's devastating. A lot of young people at a very young age, when they go through their first breakup, they have their first love and they have their first breakup. A lot of young men hurt themselves. They learn how to self-harm. Some even take their own lives. It's very sad. It's very sad. Why? Because it's sad because a young person is losing their life, and it's sad because that first breakup is serious. That first heartbreak is very, very serious. But they don't understand that, hey, if I could just make it through this, I'll be okay. They don't need a pill. What they need to do is learn how to manage that pain and learn how to overcome it and learn how to develop themselves so they can become stronger. So the next relationship won't be as brutal. It won't be as brutal. My father died when I was 21 years old. Wasn't the first time I lost a loved one, but it was super intense, super powerful. And I went through, let's see, 21 up until I was about 30. So I went through, almost an entire decade of depression and alcoholism because I couldn't process the pain because I had so many unresolved emotions in regards to my dad. I love my dad, but I was angry with him about certain things. Love my dad, but I felt like he wasn't there enough for me. Love my dad, but we had our issues. He was mad at me about certain things too. He wanted me to grow up and become, a stellar citizen and go to college and be an engineer or something like that. And that wasn't in the cards for me. So we had our issues, and knowing we had our issues when he died suddenly, it was heartbreaking. But guess what? I didn't need a pill. I just needed to learn how to process that pain. So when my father passed away, I went through all that time just drinking and being upset and going through anxiety. It was miserable. But you know what? I had to learn to overcome that. And by the time I was 30, I said to myself, you know what? It's time for me to stop being depressed. Time for me to process all of this pain, deal with this pain, and grow. I started to meditate every single day. I went to a therapist. A very unusual experience, but very eye-opening experience for me. I started reading about how to process grief. There's a book called Solving People Problems for the Creation and Maintenance of Family Wealth, or something like that. And one of the things it talks about in that book is when somebody in the family passes away and dies, ancient cultures or indigenous cultures, the whole family would gather together. Cultures all around the world do that. When somebody dies, everybody comes together at the funeral. They eat afterward. They have a good time. But in indigenous cultures, a lot of times what they'll do is everybody stays together. They come together for the funeral, then they stay together for like weeks, months, because having your family there helps you to process that pain. Being close to family helps you process that pain. There's something in the human neural network that makes it so that we need to socialize during these moments of pain. We survived and have gone through millennia of trials and tribulations and uncertainty. We survived because we were close to our families, and as people who are closer to their families can process these situations with greater ease. And once I learned that, I lost my grandmother. I think I was 35 or 36 when my grandmother passed away. And what did I do? Because I learned how to process this pain, you know what I did? I stayed around my family. Now, when my father died, I isolated. I hated being around anybody when my father died. I was 21 years old. I was rebellious. I was a drunk. I hated being around people, even my family. My family would be calling the house like, hey, how y'all doing? We just want to make sure you guys are okay. I'll be up in my room. My brothers would be on the phone talking to the family. I wouldn't want to talk to nobody. So the pain lasted a lot longer for me than it probably did for my brothers. Right? But when my grandmother passed away, I spent all my time around family. I spent so much time around family that this time it was easier to process that pain and that grief. And I was okay. I didn't go through a decade of depression. I didn't start drinking and start popping pills or none of that stuff when my grandmother passed away. I was okay because I learned. I became stronger. I didn't become dependent on another crutch to help me get through that pain. I survived that situation and survived that pain because I had to develop. When they talk about when corporations talk about successful CEOs, a lot of times what they look for, they look at your management skills and your education and your degrees and all of that stuff. But there's one research study they were doing talking about the most successful CEOs. The one characteristic they all had in common was resilience. They had all gone through some kind of really painful, traumatic experience, and they all came out the other side stronger and wiser. I hate to say it, but learning how to deal with pain is a part of human evolution. Going through personal trials and tribulations and overcoming this pain is a part of human evolution. And my fear, I know it's gonna sound, you know, it's gonna sound grandiose, but my fear is what's gonna happen to social evolution and human evolution when we're not able to process the pain. When every single thing that happens to us, no matter how minor, because a breakup, it can be brutal and painful, but it's relatively minor. It's not like losing your whole family in a bus accident. You go through an intense breakup, you don't necessarily need pills for that. What's going to happen to human beings' ability to deal with obstacles and deal with pain? What are we going to see in a social landscape over the next couple of decades as the use of antidepressants increases? Because the use of antidepressants is increasing, but are we seeing a more peaceful culture? Are we seeing increases in mental health? It's strange to me that the use of psychopharmaceuticals is increasing, but mental health is not. Doesn't that indicate that the use of psychopharmaceuticals is not solving our problems? What happens to a young man who gets rejected by his girlfriend, takes a pill in order to help him deal with it, and then a few years later he gets rejected by another woman? He has not learned how to deal with that initial pain. He has not learned how to deal with his emotions and process his emotions because he's leaning on that pill. So what happens? Same thing that happens to a lot of young men. He'll probably, if he can't get his hands on that pill to help him process and deal with that pain, or block out the pain, I should say. If he can't get his hands on that pill, he's gonna start drinking. He's gonna start smoking weed. He's gonna start popping pills. He's gonna start watching pornography and become obsessed with pornography. And he's gonna become more aggressive, more mentally unbalanced young man. A lot of these young men you see out here who are engaging in this very bizarre and aggressive behavior towards women, a lot of times it's because they were not allowed to feel pain. They weren't allowed to feel pain at a young age. And as they got older and bigger and stronger and more aggressive, they become extremely violent. Why are they becoming extremely violent? It's simple. They're becoming extremely violent because nobody ever taught them how to process pain and control themselves. You have to learn how to process pain and control yourself to be a man. And if you've been in a situation where somebody can give you a pill in order to block out pain and keep you from processing the pain, how can you develop and be a real man? How can you fully develop if nobody is going to allow you to go through painful experiences? I did a broadcast on my channel, and you can find it. Anybody who sees this, you can find it. It's called it was a 4-part series I did called Maladies of the Avatars. Why did I call it Maladies of the Avatars? Because each of the individuals who you see as divine, whether it be Jesus Christ, whether it be Moses in the Bible, whether it be the Buddha, whether it be the goddess Isis or Aset, as her original name was, they were all these spiritual theological characters from these holy texts. And every single last one of them had gone through a traumatic experience and had temporarily some kind of mental illness. Moses had imposter syndrome. Aset went through trauma-induced depression. The Buddha suffered from anhedonia, couldn't find pleasure in life, right? But they all overcame, and then guess what? They awakened to their own divinity. And that's what I want for us. I want us to go through the situation and go through the pain so we can awaken to our own divinity. I'm not saying that I want you to suffer, but I want you to overcome suffering and realize that you don't, in some of these situations, you don't have to get locked in suffering. Suffering is a part of life. Sadness is not necessarily. You can suffer and still maintain happiness. I can think about my father now after going through the experience that I went through. I think about my father now sometimes and cry and smile at the same time. Because even with that sadness, I still feel happy and blessed to be alive. Over the last couple of years, I had the worst couple of years of my entire life as far as my health. My health was rapidly declining. Sick, barely able to digest food, throwing up, lost like 40 pounds. But oddly enough, I was still positive and still happy. How? I learned how to deal with pain. I learned how to deal with it. People call me and ask me, "How you doing? How you feeling? You all right?" Well, I got this going on and that going on, but I'm still thinking positive. I'm gonna overcome this. That's what I feel in my spirit. I'm not gonna let it bring me down. I learned how to deal with that pain. After what I already been through, this is nothing to me. And I don't believe in death. So what do I got to be? What do I got to be afraid of? But that's something I had to learn by experiencing the pain. I was stuck in my personal development from the age of 21 to 30 because I was drunk and high all the time because I didn't want to deal with the pain. But the pain just kept multiplying. I would block out the pain with alcohol, and I would need bigger doses of alcohol in order to block out the pain. The pain would accumulate like water at a dam. You can't block the flow of that water. You block the flow of water, the water just going to accumulate and cause a flood. So they have to let a little bit of that water in at a time. You gotta learn how to process the pain. They had to learn how to process all that water. These huge, gigantic rivers with these big dams. The goal of the dam is not to totally block the flow of the water, but just to slow it down a little bit so we can process it. So the land can process it without it totally sweeping through the land and wiping everything away. Same thing with your pain. Learn how to process it properly so you can deal with it properly and it won't just wipe away all of my pain and depression wiped away a decade of my life. Imagine if I had to use those years for personal growth. Man, I'd be living on Mars right now. It'd be me and Elon Musk on Mars right now. I'd have been on that Mars team. I would have been the first one colonizing it. I would have built the rockets myself. That's how advanced I would have been had I simply allowed myself to go through the pain of personal development and not blocked out the pain by drinking and being high all the time. I don't want that for the people around me. I don't want that for you. Anybody who watches this, whether I know you or not, I don't want that for you. Feel the pain. Feel it. Learn how to process it. And if you don't know how to process it, ask somebody. You can Google everything else. You can Google that. You can Google, how can I grieve properly? You can Google, how can I grieve without drinking? You can Google, how can I grieve and go through this pain without smoking some weed or becoming dependent upon weed? Anything that you're dependent upon keeps you from growing. It keeps you from growing. Like a young child who becomes too dependent on their parents. And then they're 28, 29 years old calling their mother to help them solve their problems. 30 years old and calling daddy still, help them solve their problems. You're dependent upon that, and it's keeping you from personal growth and personal development. And I'm terrified of what the future holds for individuals who can't go through the pain and process it and never learn. And then as the numbers of individuals who are using these pills and using these psychopharmaceuticals, as the numbers increase, you're going to also see an increase in underdeveloped humans. They're not going to be striving for perfection. Sorry to say it. I'm not condemning anybody who really needs this, but I'm saying is as the numbers of individuals who use these medications are going to increase, it's going to be an increase in individuals who are getting these pills and who don't need them. That's just math. That's just math, simple math. Increase of individuals using the pills, increase of individuals who may not need it. Math. And so we have to be more discerning because these corporations will not be. And unfortunately, if we don't know better, what's going to happen is you're going to see some commercial saying you're feeling down, feeling lonely. Well, guess who don't feel down sometimes? Who don't feel lonely? And some of us feel down and lonely for a little while. And you may not know how to process this pain and how to change how you feel. And then somebody comes along and says, "Oh, take this pill." Then you go to your doctor and say, "Hey, I think I need," and then he says, "Sure." And next thing you know, you got a pill. As opposed to discovering what the issue is and growing. That's what we need. People ask the question, why do we suffer in life? The Nation of Islam teaches that we suffer in life because God is trying to get you to awaken to your own divinity. I personally believe I don't use the phrase God, I use the phrase creative hyper reality. The creative hyper reality is a conscious energy, a conscious force that exists outside of space and time, that creates and sustains the universe and exists everywhere and all within all of us. And this creative hyper reality can do anything, but it can't create a being like itself. So in order to get us to evolve so we can get as close to it as possible, it put us in this realm so that we can go through pain and suffering and overcome the pain and suffering through personal and collective evolution. Many of the problems that we go through and the pain that we go through is because we can't control our own inner drives, our own wild lust and animalistic thinking. Yes, of course, there's floods and there's tornadoes and there's things we can't control. But think about how much pain is in the world that we could control if we could just make better humans. Think about it. How many murders, how many rapes, how many killings, how much sex trafficking, how much violence, abuse of women, abuse of children, abuse of men, lies, deception, corruption. How much of that is caused by humans? That's not caused by wild acts of nature and acts of God. That's caused by underdeveloped humans. That's caused by animalistic human beings who need to grow and develop, and they never learn how to handle their pain. And they realize they didn't have to. They realized they didn't have to. If I can get a pill, I won't have to. If I can get a drink, I won't have to. And I know I'm not knocking anybody because I've been there myself. I told y'all I was an alcoholic. I don't want to deal with this pain, and I don't know how to. 21 years old, and my father's dead. So many things that I wanted to say to him, and so many things I wanted him to say to me. So many conversations that I wish we could have had that are gone now. Now I'm older and I'm more mature and more spiritual. I don't believe in death, but he's not here in the physical for me to see him and touch him. Just like in the past, and this is another reason why this hurts so much. In the past, I wasn't able to see him and touch him because he was incarcerated. I lost my father multiple times. I lost my father 3 times. First time I lost him when I was 7 or 8, he got incarcerated. Second time I lost him when he died. Well, second time I lost him was when he got out and then decided he wanted to leave the family and go be with somebody else. Last time I lost him, he died. So imagine experiencing 2 miniature deaths before the big bang, before the big one hit. It's a lot of accumulated pain. But I had to develop a lot of personal skills and a lot of personal strength to overcome that. The goal wasn't to block it out, and the goal wasn't to learn how to continue to function despite my pain. That's what the medications are for. The medications are to help you continue to function despite your pain, to speed through the process so you can go back to work because corporations want to make money for other corporations. How much money are these corporations losing out on? Keep in mind, a lot of these corporations and these companies are owned by the same rich oligarchs. So they're thinking to themselves, man, how much money we lose for mental health every year? How much money we lose for people getting really, really stressed out? How much money we lose for people getting burned out? How much money we lose for individuals who are depressed? Make these pills and send them back to work. They're messing up our profit margin, and we can't allow that. I'm all for individuals getting medication if they need medication, but who are these individuals at these corporations who can make that decision? How can you make that prediction unless something's not right? Because mental illness is supposed to be something that's random. Individuals with schizophrenia, like a lot of times it's kind of random. You don't know who's gonna have it. Like some people get cancer. Sometimes you don't know who's gonna get it. There are some things that are predictors, but sometimes you really can't predict these things. They're random. So if something is supposed to be random, something like mental health is supposed to be random, or mental illness is supposed to be random, how can they predict and predict so well and predict that things are gonna go so swimmingly for them that they're gonna make so much? How can they make that prediction unless something ain't right? And so I recommend to anybody, whenever my doctor recommends a pill to me or a medication to me, the first thing I ask is, how can I do this naturally? And they always say, well, you really can't, just take the pill. And then I speak to somebody who's a naturopath or a herbalist. They let me know what needs to get done and I do it, and I don't need the medication no more. And a lot of times the predictors of mental health problems and mental illness, like obesity and lack of close relationships, these are things you don't need medication for. These are not things you need medication for. And one thing with me, when I was going through depression and anxiety, one thing that I did that saved my soul was I started the practice of meditation. And it was a daily practice. And I tell everybody all the time, instead of the pill, instead of the medication, try meditation. I started off when I was having severe panic attacks. I started off with just 5 minutes a day of meditation. And I would just repeat the mantra, I am in the present moment, for 5 minutes. And then it became 10 minutes. And then it became 15 minutes. And after a while, I was able to meditate for an hour. And I never wanted to take no pills for my depression. I never wanted to take no medication for my depression. And I'm not going to sit here and say that everything is perfect now. But one thing I will say is that I'm way more stable now without the medication, just with maturity and changing up my practice, changing up my routine. A lot of times it's our daily routines that make us mentally ill. You know, you can become very mentally strong and empower yourself by adding positive activities into your routine. And if you can add 5 minutes of meditation a day. I'm not talking about meditate for 5 minutes and then a week later say, hey, it didn't work. I hate when people did that. I had a business teaching people meditation when I was in Connecticut, and I would teach them how to meditate, and I would give them homework assignments. I'd be like, go home and meditate, this amount of times and for this amount of minutes, and they would come back the next week and be like, no, I didn't do it. Or some people would say to me, yeah, I tried meditation before, it didn't work. How often did you do it? I did it like once, didn't work. So if you can meditate 5 minutes a day, every day, no excuses. Every single day, 5 minutes a day. Just start with that. Just start with that. And then increase it. Just like any other medication, you increase it. But now your medication is meditation. And if you're talking to a psychiatrist and they're saying you need pills, ask them, would it be possible for me to maybe, perhaps, not use the pill, but do something natural? That's like I said, that's the first thing I ask my doctor whenever they try to give me a pill for something. Yeah, your cholesterol is high. My cholesterol's high. Yeah, your cholesterol's a little bit high. That's okay. Take this pill. You know what? I don't want the pill. How about I eat an apple? Literally. I read somewhere that eating an apple, something in the acid of the apple clears your arteries. So I started eating an apple every single day. Then I went back to the doctor and they're like, yeah, your cholesterol is great. How'd you do that? Taking the pills? Nah, I ain't take not one of them pills. I ain't gonna take none. Nature wins every time. And there are individuals out there who really legitimately need the medication. I'm not knocking anybody. But if you have a conversation with your psychiatrist or whoever's giving you the medication or suggesting the medication, ask them if you could not use it and see if there's a natural way. And going the natural way will help you to develop and become a stronger, better person and learn skills. And these skills of how to deal with stressful situations or how to deal with trauma. Once you learn these are skills you can keep going back to and keep using. You don't just use them once and they're gone forever. You can use them, you can go back to them every single time you need to. They're always going to be there for you because they're not a part of you. And you evolved. You became closer to developing into a god. The creative hyper reality smiles on you. All right, I'm out of here. Gotta go to bed. Been a long day. Peace and blessings to all of y'all. Anybody who watches this, anybody who sees this, I love you. And if you need me, I will be here tomorrow. Be blessed.